everyone? Adam here. So it's your podcast. I got to sit down with Darcy Weir, who is a documentary filmmaker. His latest documentary is called Volcanic UFO Mysteries. Darcy's made quite a few documentaries, and it was a fascinating conversation to have with him because his knowledge of the subject of UFOs, everything around it, is so deep. We talk for, I think almost an hour, and he references one small detail just to make sure he didn't get wrong. He's just off the top of his head, and we go really deep on the UFO phenomenon, and then we talk specifically about his documentary and what that's all about. Even if you're not the biggest UFO person, I recommend you check this interview out. He is a fascinating guy, very intelligent. I had a great time talking to him. Hey everybody, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I'm sitting down with Darcy Weir. How you doing?
Good, thanks, Adam.
I appreciate you taking the time to come on. So you have a new documentary coming out.
It's out now. It actually was released in March. No, sorry, February, first week of February. Yeah.
Okay, so it's been out about a month now.
Yeah.
And it's available on VOD everywhere?
Pretty much. It's available on cable and satellite on demand. So I think Verizon Fios, Cox, cable, Dish Network, all that stuff, plus Amazon Prime and usual streaming services like
iTunes,
that,
Apple TV, all that. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
And the movie, we should probably say, is called Volcanic UFO Mysteries.
Yes.
This is very interesting to me, and there's actually been a lot in the news about UFOs lately, so I think you hit the timing really well.
Yeah, I think for mainstream media, I'm probably doing okay in terms of timing, but for the sort of subculture media that is this group of people that have been following the UFO sort of phenomenon, the timing is like every month of every year. There's something going on around the world,
Okay, fair enough. It's always in season.
Yeah, I'd say. I think if you look up the statistics, the number one thing that is searched on internet search engines like Google around the world is UFOs, other than porn.
Sure, of course. All right. When did you first become interested in UFOs?
I was in university at the time. I was actually studying film at a university out in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I had an elective course on life in the universe. It was an astrobiology course that introduced you to the concepts of searching for life in the universe, because technically that's what NASA is doing. And they have many different programs to do such a thing. For example, SETI, which is Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Stanton Friedman calls them, I think, silly excuse or something. Anyways, this is a UFO researcher, Stanton Friedman, who's now passed. He passed in 2019. He thought that many of the NASA institutions kind of had a cover story to explain away anything that was interesting coming from space. And they really were just doing PR to cover up a lot of UFO cases that were having to do with things around the planet. And anyways, I took that course, and you learn about the Drake equation, which is a mathematical probability that we have, in just our galaxy alone, millions of intelligent races that may not be able to, not all of them could travel upon the stars, within the solar within the galactic disk that we're rotating on. But there are, by this mathematical equation, there are millions of intelligent species out there in our cosmic ocean. And if some of them have the technology and the know-how to travel from star to star, there's a possibility they've come here. And we are in the boons, so to speak, of our galactic disk. We are on the outer edge. And that means any stars that are closer to the center of the galactic disk could be billions and millions of years ahead of us in terms of technology and evolution, so to speak. And so that's where all this can be proven mathematically. But for many years, the government and the military industrial complex and the research agencies like NASA that I spoke about before, they have told you in the mainstream media, there's nothing to see here.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was something recently, I think it was the New York Times, said that one of the government agencies, and I probably should have looked up the article, but you're probably familiar with it. They said that they discovered a craft that it was like the quote was something like "not of this planet" or something like that.
Right. So that was probably the April 2020 admission from the
That
Pentagon.
sounds right. Yeah.
And we're already in 2021 coming up on that release, which they basically, what happened in 2017 was three videos were released to New York Times by To the Stars Academy, which was headed up by Tom DeLonge, and he was backed by basically the military industrial complex. So they had used him and his not-for-profit organization to release this information to media like New York Times. New York Times did an expose. This was, front page, the second fold news, and it really caught fire, and it's been reported on ever since. But the Pentagon officially said, yes, those craft are real and they're not from our inventory. Therefore, they're probably off-world. Okay. So that's huge.
Oh, yeah.
That's groundbreaking. And, that admission came 2 months into the pandemic. So obviously the pandemic kind of was front and center, just like, in 2001, September 11th, those attacks would have been front and center over all the other kinds of news that was happening around that time, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And the question is, are people panicking? Are people worried about this? I think people are excited and interested in the UFO phenomenon at an all-time high around the world. Mm-hmm. And therefore, this is a pretty hopeful time for disclosure to happen even further. Meaning, if the government was releasing that stuff through To the Stars Academy in 2017, and now 2020, they say, yep, not ours. And we're now into 2021, and we have a new president, Joe Biden. There's a very good possibility in the next 4 years, we're going to have a even bigger release of information from the agencies that surround the president, and then the president is going to probably make a statement to the media. That's the theory, the working theory that Stephen Bassett is going by. And Stephen Bassett is a activist I feature in this documentary, Volcanic UFO Mysteries. He's been working on Capitol Hill, and he's been fighting for disclosure from the United States government and the military, for that matter, for over 25 years. But he's pretty hopeful that they're going to do something this spring, which would involve congressional hearings that will be televised, and those congressional hearings will have a lot of the witnesses that were part of the release in 2017. Major Fravor, as an example of one.
Yep, I was going to bring him up.
And many more people that no one have heard of before yet, from different backgrounds, military backgrounds most likely, that will testify to the Congress and say, this is what happened, this is how it happened, and there's evidence like videos and tracking data to prove it. And that will probably blow this whole subject open to mass media again. And after the hearings, there'll probably be more hearings, and I think it's going to be a new era for people. I hope that this is what happens. The prediction is coming from Stephen Bassett. This is somebody who's actively on Capitol Hill and has a lot of inside sources. But who knows? Maybe we go into World War III somehow in the next 3 months, and then that all gets pushed.
No, let's hope not. Have you heard about, well, I'm sure you've heard about it, or what do you know about it was kind of almost like a backdoor clause in this COVID bill that they have coming out, and has nothing to do with COVID, but they said, oh, part of this is that the government's required to release X amount of information on UFOs.
Yeah, it was more of like a comment, an added sort of caveat, and it was a 180-day window that all government agencies, military agencies, research agencies would release their documents. And if you take note, in the past month, the CIA released thousands of documents. So it looks like that clause is actually taking effect, because some agencies are starting to submit their documents and declassify them to the press. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the stuff, as we know historically, has been redacted and sort of sanitized, so to speak, meaning it's information that isn't necessarily going to be as groundbreaking as we hope it to be, but it's a step in the right direction, and it's something that needs to be done.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that on a federal government level, they're talking about releasing UFO documents, which implies that every agency has UFO documents. So I thought that was really interesting that it came up.
Oh, yeah. I'd say, well, we know the CIA, FBI, most certainly the NSA does, the National Security Agency. I'd say NASA does, but they're not as beholden in that, I don't think, in that bill, because they're mostly, I think it was directed towards security agencies. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what else comes to fruition, and that date ends in June, so we still have some more runway for other things to come out.
Definitely. And you mentioned the Air Force pilot Fravor, I forget his first name. And for people who don't know, he had a really interesting story that was a first-hand account. And from what I understand, he was basically told, like, oh, yeah, that happens all the time.
Yes, it's David Fravor, and he, that experience that he had that's related to the Tic Tac UFO release. You can see this object that kind of is inside of a parentheses type targeting system of this aircraft, and it kind of turns and then shoots off at a incredible speed.
With no heat signature too.
No heat signature. It has like kind of an aura around it. This video was shot in infrared. So if people don't really take stock in what that means, the human eye can only see certain light spectrums, right? And just beyond our capability of visibility naturally is infrared on one end of the spectrum, and then on the other is ultraviolet. And it goes off like there's other more than that that are not visible to the human eye. But we have technology that allows us to see into these different light spectrums, and we've been using them in space for years to beam back data when looking into the stars to see if there's planets and all kinds of objects floating around in space outside of our solar system and in our solar system, because those wavelengths of light they're higher in quality, and there's much more of it quantity. And so when you see a video like that, you know that these pilots, first of all, are being trained to observe things that the average person is not, able to really pick up on. And their equipment is state of the art. They're basically set up to see things like enemy aircraft, and when it picks up an object that is operating at a speed and sort of agility that no enemy aircraft or local inventory is capable of doing, it's really shocking and interesting, to say the least. So that video, the Tic Tac video, and there's also the gimbal video. These are shot off the coast of the United States, one in the Pacific region and the other in, I think, the Atlantic region. These, David Fravor was actually assigned to track down the Tic Tac UFO because they had for a number of months been actively tracking these UFOs that are flying around in this airspace. And later on, the government, in this whole press release that happened in 2017, Luis Elizondo, however you want to pronounce his name, he used to work on a program called AATIP, AATIP, Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program. And that operated for a number of years. I believe it operated from, let me just double check.
Sure.
It was founded in 2007, and the program ran for until 2012 when it was dissolved. And Luis Elizondo was actually the head. He was the director. There was $22 million budgeted for that program. And that is just one of many programs that have been in existence since 1947 that undoubtedly have been tasked to track and identify UFOs and find out more about them. I think what we're finding out now is that the government is trying to, it's almost like a PR exercise for them, and they're releasing this information to buy back trust from the public, because many people have been crying wolf for years that they know what's going on out there, and they've been investigating this stuff secretly, but they don't want to admit it. And yeah, I mean, they just established in 2020, or was it 2021, a new study, a new program, which has another $22 million allocated to it for identifying UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. And they have the Space Force that just started up under Trump's watch. And even before Space Force, people have been talking about for years the militarization of space secretly. So it just seems like we're getting some information now. It's a bit of a lag, but perhaps the military and the government that surrounds it is getting ready to release some more groundbreaking information to us.
The one thing that I found the most compelling about the Fravor story was that the craft, whatever you want to call it, was actively jamming him.
Yeah,
which I found fascinating, because it's like you can explain away a graphical thing. Maybe he didn't see what he thought he saw, but the fact that his equipment and they could measure it was actually jammed shows intelligence and intent.
Yep. And that's commonly reported. There's a pretty famous UFO incident that happened over Israel. A Israeli pilot was scrambled to chase down a UFO, was ordered to shoot it down back in, I think it was, let me try and find some information here. Well, I think it was 1957. And as soon as he basically put a lock on the craft, tried to put a lock on the craft with his targeting system, it's almost as if the craft had anticipated that he was about to put a lock on it, and it shot off. So I think if you have possible extraterrestrial race that's visiting our planet, they have studied us for some time, and they are acquainted with our technology, which is quite rudimentary or archaic compared to theirs. If you think about it, the capability to travel star to star would be just absolute monumental technology would be required, and energy possibly.
Yeah.
We're still a fossil fuel run civilization. So we're looking, at these things, and we're thinking, what kind of gas is that craft running on? Obviously, it's not running on the same energy our aircraft are. So if you think about David Fravor's testimony about his radar being jammed to track this object, it means that this is like child's play to these craft. They would have way more sophisticated technology to understand what we're doing and to counteract what we're trying to do.
Speaking of the fuel and the propulsion system and the technology, I'm blanking on the guy's name, but he's a very famous
whistleblower.
Whistleblower who came out. I think it was in the early to mid '80s.
Bob Lazar.
Yes, Bob Lazar. Yes, and he has a very compelling story that he worked on these firsthand, and it was all very segmented, and he wasn't allowed to like cross talk with other people because they didn't want anyone putting the whole picture together.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he started to talk about it a little bit, he thought his life was going to be in danger. He got let go from his position, and he started bringing people out to where they were trying to fly these things because he figured the more eyes he had on, the less likely he could be silenced. Or if he was silenced, it would raise all these red flags.
Yeah, so the story with Bob Lazar is really interesting. You're talking about, his testimony, and he said that his task in this research project that he was hired for under, black budget military sort of research group
But
was
there is
to.
records of it. Like there's records that he was a government employee and he worked in this area.
There's not really. He said that he went to university at MIT, and apparently there's not even like a record of him going to MIT.
Okay,
But
I didn't know that.
people, yeah, there's some interesting aspects to his story. He is a brilliant man, and he does work in producing scientific sort of products. He has his own at-home lab, and I think he does chemistry sets and stuff that he sells around the country, educational sort of chemistry sets. And he is a brilliant guy, but people question his authenticity because his records are not very trackable to the testimony that he gave. But then people say the reason for these records not being available is because if the government wants to debunk you or make you look less credible, they can expunge those records. They can get rid of your history so you look like a liar. Mm-hmm. That's very possible that it happened to Bob Lazar. An interesting thing in his case is that he said back in the 1980s when he came forward with this story that part of his research project in the compartmentalized work that he was doing to reverse engineer this UFO craft the United States government had captured among many that they were researching and trying to backwards engineer for their own military means, for their own building of technology to use in the national security of the United States. He was tasked to work on the propulsion system, and that means the engine, so to speak, or the propulsion system that was used to make this model, which he called the sports model, move around in the sky. And he said the energy was like a little thimble-sized piece of nuclear material called element 115. And this was a kind of like a synthetic uranium that was highly radioactive, like highly active, but it appeared to be produced, and just for us to produce like one atom of this stuff would take a huge amount of energy and would be very expensive to produce and yada yada yada. Mm-hmm. Well, in recent years, we have discovered element 115, mm-hmm. and we have figured out that we can produce it. So this like thimble-sized piece of it that was synthesized basically was from, if it's true, some kind of civilization that is just light years ahead of us in terms of scientific advancements, because we're just discovering you can make this stuff, but to synthesize the same amount of this that was dropped into this compartment to create the energy that was running this craft, that would, we're not even close to being able to create the same little nugget of nuclear energy or nuclear byproduct, so to speak.
That was one of the really fascinating things. I mean, he's got a lot of fascinating things about his story, Lazar, but the fact that his story has been so consistent for the last 4 decades, and that he's been talking about this element since the early 80s, and just in the last few years, they're like, oh yeah, here it is. Like, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty vindicating for him, I'd say. And Jeremy Corbell, another filmmaker, made a documentary on him called Lazar. So yeah, I think people can check that out on Netflix. I think
it's actually on Netflix.
Yeah.
So now getting to your documentary, no, sorry, we kind of went off on some tracks there. You got into UFOs when you were in film school. So the love for film came first.
Yeah, I've always been a film fanatic and interested in film. And this documentary is one of 8 that I've published in the past 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And I like to sort of focus on unique stories within this overarching phenomenon of this story that's been happening for a long time. There's people that have been talking about ancient aliens. There's people that have been talking about underground bases and abduction. I've talked about in one of my documentaries called Being Taken, the abduction phenomenon. In another documentary called The Underground, I talked about a supposed whistleblower's testimony of underground base building by the industrial complex, military industrial complex, and a history of sort of UFO cover-up type stuff. And in this documentary, out of my body of work, it's about volcanoes, active volcanoes that are currently active in Mexico. Because I was working with a journalist from Mexico City named Jaime Maussan. He's been reporting on UFO related material for over 40 years, which is pretty incredible. And he's pretty famous down in the Latin American countries. And he just had this incredible body of information about UFO activity that was happening around volcanoes like Colima and Popocatépetl, to name a couple. And I wanted to shine a light on that story. And I feel like Mexico especially is a underrepresented place in terms of talking about the UFO events that have happened throughout history.
For sure. And wasn't it in Mexico where they found, I don't know if it was etchings or paintings from possibly the Mayans? I'm kind of vaguely putting it together, what I read, that looks like they were visited, or the drawings or paintings would indicate they were visited from an outside species or an outsider planet, extraterrestrial.
Yeah, there's a famous there's a famous temple. I'm not quite sure where it is. It might be in Teotihuacan or somewhere.
Is that the Gobekli Tepe, or am I getting the name wrong?
No, Gobekli Tepe, I'm pronouncing that wrong, is actually in the Middle East.
Okay.
But I think you're talking about some temple art that has been discovered where it looks like a man is inside of a craft, like almost operating like a NASA space capsule.
Yeah.
So people believe that that's linked to the Mayans being encountered by you know, possible ancient astronauts or something like that. But yeah, there's a lot of ancient astronaut theory from findings around Latin America and even the Giza Plateau in Egypt. There's some strange glyphs from these people as well.
That's all very interesting. And Mexico has a lot of those ancient civilizations that I don't think get talked about as much. Um, so I know you said you like to find like the niches within the larger subject, and you did give a couple examples of Latin America and sightings near volcanoes. Why and how volcanoes specifically, or sightings with volcanoes? Like, why narrow it down that far?
Yeah, so if we look at the Tic Tac UFO video, right? This is video proof of a craft operating at speeds and doing things technically that our craft can't do, that we know of. And when you look at these videos that are featured in this documentary, I mentioned this before, but Colima, fiery volcano Colima, which is in the west of Mexico, that was erupting in 1988, and thousands of people had seen it, had been watching this during the day. A news agency was, summoned their videographers to go out and get footage of this eruption in broad daylight. And Mr. Guzman, who was a videographer, set up his camera with his crew and was recording this volcano erupting, pyroclastic flows and rock and tons of ash clouds were pluming from the crater. And this UFO can be seen slowly cruising through this ash cloud and then going out to the other side of it and taking off into the sky on the other side of the volcano. And so if you think back to, I think it was like around 2008, there was a super volcano eruption in Iceland that grounded most of Europe for like a month. It was really disruptive, and that was just from ash floating in the upper atmosphere that could have, gotten into plane engines and down to plane. So we don't have anything. We don't have any airplanes in our inventory that are commercial or military that could withstand the temperatures, the debris, and all that sort of stuff that's taking place right at a volcano when it's erupting. And we see this craft or this object, unidentified flying object, going through the ash cloud. So I think that's incredible. It's interesting. And I wanted to make a documentary about this type of activity that's been happening for years.
That is very interesting. So it's the trajectory, the speed, and the way it moves that kind of dismisses, like, oh, is this just something as a result of the explosion in the volcano?
Yeah, I mean, like if it was a ball, there's such things as ball lightning that forms when a volcano erupts. That usually would be above the crater. It wouldn't be floating alongside in an ash cloud, and it wouldn't be going off into the sky with intelligent sort of maneuverability, right? And this object that I'm talking about, for example, has this sort of disc-like shape and has a kind of aura, which we see in the footage from the Tic Tac video. So similarities, and it's not moving really fast, but that makes you pause, because if you were flying in air, first of all, these volcanoes, because they're active, right off the bat, this is restricted airspace. It's extremely dangerous to fly in this area. So it wouldn't be a commercial craft or a helicopter or anything like that. and the fact that it wasn't moving quickly and just cruising through an ash cloud and not falling would indicate that this was an intelligently maneuvering craft.
Okay, that is very interesting. When you decided this was the subject matter you're going to tackle for your latest documentary, um, and you started to look into it, how does that research process go? I mean, obviously you're into this anyway because we've been talking 40 minutes on UFOs and you've looked up like one thing. So clearly you know what you're talking about. Um, how do you differentiate the nonsense from the more solid stuff? And how do you go about finding I'm not sure if I'm phrasing this right. I don't want to sound like I'm insulting you at all because it's definitely not my intention. But how do you separate? Because I'm sure in any like with anything, there's people who try to give you information. You're like, no, that's not anything. Just stop. You know, how do you separate that?
Well, to be honest, it just takes tons of research, and I have found out things since my very first documentary that I released back in 2012 about a character named Phil Schneider, who said he worked on underground base construction for the United States military, and he said he got into a battle with a subterranean alien race when their work busted through to a chamber that they were inhabiting under the underground. Mm-hmm. I found out some information about that guy that seemed more to indicate that some of the stuff he wasn't saying was true. And we re-released that documentary to add some of that information near the end of the documentary to say, like, not everything he said was true, and that's what you have to do when you get new information. You have to try and revise and change your stance on things. Not everything in this phenomenon is black and white too. There's a lot of gray area. Sometimes you get folks like Bob Lazar that have seen something or done something that's incredible. And Bob Lazar is not this type of guy. I don't think he's one that's looking for fame and fortune on his experience. But there are others out there that are claiming to have information, to have experiences that are not true, and they are providing basically disinformation, which hurts the credibility of this phenomenon, right?
Right.
If people are going to accept that we're not alone and take the word from the United States military when they're releasing this information, they're going to be more likely to avoid that truth or dismiss it when there's folks out there that are making up lies that discredit or make the subject look like a joke. So yeah, you have to be careful. I've definitely fallen prey to some sort of cons out there, but I'm constantly trying to find out the truth and put together the best information possible.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess in any kind of documentary, no matter the subject, it's going to be the same kind of struggle separating fact from fiction, or maybe it's grounded in fact but sensationalized or things along those lines.
For sure. And I mean, even every documentary out there has bias. I'm not making these documentaries to say that extraterrestrials don't exist. I'm making these documentaries kind of in a activist sort of way, mm-hmm. to prove that there's suppression of this information, and that there's tons and tons of events that have happened around the planet, not just in the United States, but Mexico and China and Europe and Canada, all kinds of countries have reported these incredible events that can't be explained away as atmospheric or natural phenomenon, or sometimes astrological, or whatever, like stars and planets and aircraft being misidentified. There's some incredible things that have happened in Australia or Africa, supposed aircraft, UFOs that have landed and have been mass witnessed by hundreds of people, and those stories have been published in the paper. In Australia, it's called Westall 66. And South Africa, it's the Areola school incident. So you look at these really credible and highly investigated incidents, and you have to basically put your logical thinking cap on and say, well, if it's not ours, where's it from? And how come we're not, hearing from our mainstream academic and research institutions what they know?
Right. Yeah. Why is it a almost taboo topic to talk about at like an academic level?
Yeah. And sorry, just to your point. So my bias is presented in some of my documentaries, obviously, because I'm trying to educate people on a phenomenon that is important to me. Just like somebody that's making a documentary about historical criminal events, or women's rights, or food, Supersize Me. These are documentaries that have bias, that want to prove something to the viewer.
Right. They're educating and presenting fact, but the person making it always or generally has a stand.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And it's good that you say that right up front, because I think a lot of people, maybe not a lot of people, but some people with documentaries would be almost dismissive of like, well, of course he's going to say that. He's trying to prove A, B, and C. It's like, well, yeah, that's what he believes. So that's the movie he's making.
Pretty much.
Yeah. When you were making your latest documentary, did you travel through Latin America? Did you go on site to see these places?
I was in Mexico City for, interviews and collecting information from Jaime Maussan. I've been to Australia to film there for covering the Westall 66 incident that I discussed earlier. I travel a lot for my documentaries. I've been all over the United States, Canada, Europe.
And you can feel free to not answer this next part. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but do you find funding to do these, or are you saving up on your own? And just that amount of travel has to add up.
It's a mix. It's a mix, like you work with sometimes an executive producer, and sometimes you fund it out of your own pocket.
Whatever gets the job done.
Yeah, especially my earlier work was mostly out of my own pocket.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's like any filmmaker. You got to make it happen for yourself.
Yeah, James Cameron, truck driver, saved up his money, right?
There you go. So all 8 of your documentaries have been on the subject of UFOs. 2
of them were on Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Okay. Yeah. Sasquatch Among Wild Men, which was released in November of 2020, and The Unwanted Sasquatch, which was a re-release from 2016. A director's cut was released at the end of 2020.
Oh, okay. So you've been very busy. You have a lot of stuff coming out, or that's come out.
Yeah. It's been a pretty active past
decade.
Yeah. But I'm
a,
passionate about it. I love covering these stories because they're really interesting.
You definitely do sound passionate about it. I mean, that's undeniable. So that's great that you got to find a way to take what you love, movie making, and take another passion and meld them together.
Thanks.
As far as you as a filmmaker, do you have any interest in doing a fictional movie?
Yep. I've written some scripts that would be related to the phenomenon that I've been producing documentaries about. But and you know, in film school, you as a student have to produce your own shorts and stuff, and I had done that. Even in high school, I was producing, you know, music video stuff. But
Okay.
yeah, it's you learn. You know, I'm a video editor, I'm a writer, I'm a producer, director. I'm kind of a jack of all trades,
Yeah.
so to speak. I'm even setting up the camera and lighting for a lot of my interviews, right? So,
Oh, awesome.
it's if you want to make something and not be beholden to uh, government or Hollywood funding, you have to get out there and roll up your sleeves and get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you're doing it. I mean, you had 8 movies come out in the last 8 or 9 years, so you're definitely working, which is great. I know we're running a little bit long, so I didn't mean to eat up your whole evening. We just, once we got going, it was really interesting. I just wanted more and more. But why don't you tell people one more time where they can find Volcanic UFO Mysteries?
Sure. If you want to see any of my documentaries, you can just go to my website, www.occultjourneys.com. That's my studio site. You can see the trailers, the posters, click on the poster. It'll go through to a site that you can stream it. And most of my films are free to stream if you have Prime or something else. Tubi TV, a few of them are on. Yeah, Verizon Fios, Dish Network, a whole bunch of other cable and satellite sort of on-demand services as well, Google Play, iTunes, that type of thing.
Great. And how about your socials? Do you do any social media?
Yeah, I'm just Darcy Weir on Facebook and Instagram. Hit me up there if you want to chat about something or work together on something. I'm always happy to chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. It was a fascinating conversation. So I wish you the best of luck with everything.
Thanks, Adam. It's great to meet you, and take care. Stay safe.
You too. Thanks. You too.
I'd like to thank Darcy one more time for taking time out of his day to come on and talk to me. I had a great time talking to him. He's a fascinating guy. We're going to touch base and do this again soon, so there will be more coming your way. Speaking of more coming your way, please remember to like and subscribe to our channel. Really helps us grow our audience, and we do have a lot more interviews, movie coverage, comic coverage, things like that coming your way. You're not going to want to miss out. Make sure you listen to So Wizard Podcast every single week wherever you get your podcasts. SoWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, merchandise, videos, and more. So Wizard Podcast can also be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get multiple monthly bonus shows. We love hearing feedback, so drop us a note in the comments, leave us something on social media. All the accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. And on a more personal note, if I could just grab another second of your time, I released a comic book with a friend beginning of this year. First issue came out in January. We're doing one issue a month. These are fully colored, great looking comics. We're putting a lot into them. We're really proud of what we're doing. I'd appreciate it if you could just check it out at socialstudiescomic.com. Social Studies Comic across all the major social networks. Thank you.